Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Yellow Tape. In this episode, we'll delve into the heart of one of Britain's most audacious and meticulously planned heists. The Great Train Robbery of 1963 was one of the most incredibly planned heists in British criminal history. The gang behind the Great Train Robbery was a motley crew of experienced criminals, some with a history of violence and others with expertise in planning and executing heists. The leader of the gang was Bruce Reynolds, a seasoned criminal who had previously served time in prison for various offences. Other key members included Ronald Edwards, known as Buster, Gordon Goody, Charlie Wilson and Roy James, among others. The gang members hailed from different parts of the UK and had diverse criminal backgrounds, ranging from armed robbery to burglary. While the gang members had various connections and knew each other through their criminal backgrounds, the Great Train Robbery brought them together for what would become one of the most infamous heists. The meticulously planned heist took months of preparation. The gang identified a remote stretch of railway track in Buckinghamshire near the town of Cheddington, where they would carry out the robbery. They studied the Royal Mail train schedule, including its route and timings, to ensure a successful execution. A key individual who studied the Royal Mail train route was an insider named Henry Levers. Henry Levers was a postal worker who had access to information about the train schedules and the layout of the carriages. He provided vital information to the gang about the train's route, timings, and the specific carriage containing the valuable cargo. Levers' inside knowledge was instrumental in the gang's ability to execute the heist with precision. His role in providing detailed information about the train's movements allowed the gang to plan the robbery and select the optimal location and time for the crime. On the night of August the 8th, 1963, the gang put their plan into action. One of Ronnie Biggs' roles was tampering with the signals, using a glove to cover the green light, which forced the train to stop. The train was the Glasgow to London Royal Mail service, which carried not only mail but also substantial sums of cash and valuables. As the train came to a halt, Bruce Reynolds led the gang on board, wearing masks and gloves, storming the carriages. They overpowered the train's driver, Jack Mills, and the crew, leaving them tied up and unable to raise the alarm. The gang quickly accessed the high-value package carriage, which contained the valuable cargo. Using tools, including a metal bar, they broke into the HVP carriage with Bruce Reynolds at the forefront. The robbers then forced open the safes containing a vast amount of cash, estimated to be around 2.6 million, which is equivalent to roughly £53 million today. The gang loaded the money into large mail bags and made their escape, leaving the rest of the train untouched. Despite being injured and tied up by the robbers, Mills managed to alert a signalman who in turn informed the police about the crime. The signalman named John O'Connor arrived at the scene and found Jack Mills and the rest of the crew tied up in the carriages. The Great Train Robbery had significant consequences for the Royal Mail and the banking industry. The stolen cash was primarily in the form of banknotes, which meant that the gang had effectively stolen from several banks. The Royal Mail took steps to enhance security measures and reduce the risks of similar heists occurring in the future. The event also led to changes in the transportation of high-value goods to make them more secure, including the use of armoured vehicles, secure containers and advanced surveillance systems to protect valuable cargo during transit, and details about the transportation of valuable goods were kept more confidential. The schedules and routes of these shipments were shared on a need-to-know basis, reducing the risk of insider information reaching potential criminals. Following the robbery, there was considerable public sympathy for the train driver Jack Mills, given the violence he had endured during the heist. However, Mills struggled with the emotional and physical aftermath of the ordeal and was unable to return to work as a train driver. He retired due to his injuries and lived a quiet life. Jack Mills passed away in 1970 and his death was attributed to unrelated causes. The Great Train Robbery and its effects on the victims, particularly Mills and the train crew, were widely discussed in the aftermath of the crime, and their experiences were part of the broader narrative surrounding the heist. The fugitives from the Great Train Robbery managed to evade capture for some time. Ronnie Biggs, one of the most famous members of the gang, managed to escape capture and remained a fugitive for an extended period. He initially fled to Paris, then to Spain and Australia, before finally settling in Brazil. The circumstances surrounding Biggs' arrest involved a series of events that led to his identification and capture. British authorities had been pursuing him for years, and in 1973 they received a tip that he was living in Brazil. This information, along with international extradition efforts, led to his arrest in Rio de Janeiro. After his arrest, there were legal proceedings and negotiations between Brazil and the UK regarding his his potential extradition. Ronnie Biggs, who had health issues, spent several years in Brazilian custody while the legal matters were resolved. Eventually in 2001, due to his deteriorating health and other factors, Brazil decided not to extradite him and he was released from custody. Biggs returned to the UK, where he was re-imprisoned to serve the remainder of his original 30-year sentence for his role in the Great Train Robbery. Charlie Wilson, another prominent member of the gang, lived under the assumed identity of Ronald Holloway during his time as a fugitive in Canada. After escaping the UK following the robbery, Wilson fled to Canada and adopted this false name to avoid detection by law enforcement. While living in Canada under his assumed identity, Wilson tried to maintain a low profile and avoid drawing attention to himself. However, he was eventually identified and arrested by Canadian authorities in 1968. His arrest marked the end of his time as a fugitive, and he was consequently extradited to the UK to face charges related to his involvement in the Great Train Robbery. Gordon Goodyer, who was involved in the planning of the heist, fled to Spain following the robbery. He lived there for a number of years but was arrested in 1966. Roy James initially went into hiding to evade capture. He managed to remain a fugitive for several years. During this time, he did not flee to another country like some of his fellow gang members. Instead, he continued to live within the UK while keeping a low profile. However, Roy James' life as a fugitive eventually came to an end when he was arrested in 1975. Law enforcement authorities in the UK successfully tracked him down, leading to his capture and subsequent legal proceedings related to his involvement in the robbery. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind behind the heist, was arrested in Torquay, Devon on November the 9th, 1968. Reynolds had been on the run for several years after the heist but was eventually tracked down by the police. His arrest marked the end of his time as a fugitive, and he was subsequently brought to trial for his role in the planning and executing of the robbery. One of the key breakthroughs in the investigation came when the police discovered a hideout used by the gang in Leverslade Farm, Buckinghamshire. Leverslade Farm was located near the small village of Oakley in the UK. The remote location of the farm made it an attractive choice for the gang to use as a hideout. The farm served as a base of operations for the gang in the days leading up to the robbery and immediately afterwards. They used the farmhouse as a place to plan and prepare for the heist. It was at the farm that they stored some of the equipment they needed for the robbery, including tools, masks and disguises. Leverslade Farm also functioned as a communication hub for the gang. They set up a shortwave radio system at the farm to monitor police radio frequencies and stay informed about any developments related to the robbery. After successfully executing the heist, the gang members returned to Leverslade Farm to divide the stolen money and lay low. They used the farm as a safe haven to count and distribute their share of the loot. It was at Leverslade Farm that the gang mistakenly left behind crucial evidence, including fingerprints and other clues, which eventually led the police to identify and apprehend some of the gang members. Law enforcement discovered the hideout in the days following the robbery, sparking a nationwide manhunt for the fugitives. The robbers who were apprehended faced lengthy prison sentences. In total, 12 men were convicted for their involvement in the Great Train Robbery, but the extent of involvement extended beyond the 12 individuals who were ultimately convicted. The true number of individuals who played a part in the heist may never be known with certainty. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind, received a 25-year sentence. Reynolds was released from prison on parole in 1978 after serving approximately a decade of his sentence. He went on to write about his experiences in the Great Train Robbery in a memoir titled The Autobiography of a Thief, and he occasionally appeared in media interviews. Bruce Reynolds passed away in 2013 at the age of 81, just a few months before the 50th anniversary of the Great Train Robbery. Ronnie Biggs, who had escaped to Brazil, only served half of his 30-year prison sentence due to compassionate release because of health issues. Biggs also passed away in 2013. The other gang members also received substantial prison sentences, with some serving over a decade behind bars. The Royal Mail informant Henry Levers managed to avoid legal consequences, although his cooperation with the gang was widely known. The Great Train Robbery marked the end of the gang's criminal careers and had a lasting impact on the lives of those involved. In the annals of British crime, the Great Train Robbery of 1963 stands as a remarkable testament to audacity and meticulous planning. It wasn't just a heist, it was a daring escapade that left an indelible mark on criminal history. With its audacious execution and far-reaching consequences, this epic caper reverberated through the corridors of power, the vaults of banks and the annals of justice. Even today it remains an irresistible tale that captures the imagination of those intrigued by the shadowy legends of history's most audacious outlaws. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you're a fellow true crime enthusiast.